Yeah, so really, I appreciate you, taking the time to come talk to me, man. It's really
Yeah, for sure.
something I've been wanting to do for a while, and I've been following what you're doing for a while, and yeah, really appreciate you taking some time.
I appreciate it. I appreciate it. And Elijah, did you have your own highlight page?
Yeah, I was with Lemonade Highlights. Yeah, now I do
Right.
stuff kind of separate now because I got a lot of projects that I'm working on. So yeah, now I'm just staying with it, but yeah, basically doing the same thing.
Okay, that's cool. Yeah, I remember because I think you and we had like a couple DMs like back in the day or something
Yeah,
about
yeah,
it. You know
yeah.
what I mean? But no, that's cool that's cool to see like where we've both progressed to. I remember at the time you were playing professionally, right?
Right. Was in Germany for 10 years playing, and now I'm just training kids. So yeah, it's been a while, man.
Sure,
Definitely.
for sure.
All right, so can you tell us your name, how you got started with what you're doing with G League TV, and just a little bit about yourself?
For sure. What's up, everybody? My name is Jeffrey Key, and actually, I started G League TV back in 2020, right after the pandemic started. And so, there's a little backstory to that as well. I've been a G League fan back before, when it was the D League. So around 2015 is when I really started getting into the D League. My hometown team was the Delaware 87ers, who are now the Delaware Bluecoats. And, it just became a thing where, as an NBA fan, I was like, oh, wow, all these guys, or a lot of these guys, are going to end up playing in the NBA. 87ers tickets were dirt cheap. You could get them for like $7 with your student ID. And there was no security at the games, right? So you could just walk around. You could sit wherever you want. After the game, you could wait outside the locker room and talk to the players and everything like that. So it was a real cool experience for, just like a basketball fanatic. And I was a fan going to games, following the league and everything that was going on for like 5 years until I started my G League TV page. And I really started that because at the time I was working for my college team, and we all have synergy accounts, which is where all the
Right,
college
right.
teams get their film and they break down their footage and everything like that. And my college synergy account had all the G League stuff on it too, So I remember during the seasons, I would watch like all the highlights and everything like that. And I was like, you know what? I had nothing to do, just like anybody else, when the pandemic started, and I was like, I might as well kind of just use this free time to like explore my love for the G League. I always wanted to create a basketball page, but I didn't want it to be an NBA page because if it was an NBA page, there's just so many NBA pages out there that so the point,
Right, right.
you're almost recycling the same highlights, the same information over and over again. Kyrie just got traded. Well, every single NBA page is covering the same trade, the same
Right.
takes, right? So I was like, what is something that I can do that's a little bit different from that, where I'm not competing or posting the same stuff that ESPN, Bleacher Report, House of Highlights is posting. And I was like, no
Right.
one covers the G League. Especially at the time, the G League in 2020, it was just starting to get maybe a little bit mainstream. People started to just see, oh wow, these guys are actually going to the NBA and they're producing. They're not just sitting on the bench. Some of them are producing and playing well. And so it was one of those things where how it is, like when you start a page, it starts off real slow. It took like 2 months
Right, right.
to get the first 1,000 followers, but you start making more and more videos, people start sharing, um, you know, people reach out saying they want highlight tapes. And at the time, I remember I used to make everyone's highlight tape for free. Players would reach out all the time. I just wanted the page to grow. So I was like, yeah, I'll make you a highlight tape.
Right,
Just gotta
right.
tag me in it. You know what I mean? And then, over time, it just kept growing and growing. I've been fortunate enough to like have some really big shares from the page that have helped it grow too. Like Jason Tatum has shared like 3 times. House of
Nice, nice.
Highlights has taken some of our videos and shared it. ESPN just 2 weeks ago took our video and shared it, and they tagged us Slam as well. So it's been really big, and it's been good for the G League community too. And I'm actually surprised as to how many people really care about the G League. That was probably the biggest thing out of it was like, I thought I was the only G League fan out there. I was going to all the games and I thought I was like the biggest guy out there that in terms of supporting the league, like, oh, no one really supports the league like I do. But come to show, there's tons of people that love the G League. You just kind of got to find them. And, it's the real like hardcore basketball fans that like the G League. You know what I'm saying? Like
Right,
anybody, I always
definitely,
say this.
definitely.
I always say, Elijah, like anybody can be an NBA fan. Anybody, right? It's everywhere.
Right,
You know what I'm saying?
right.
But the ones who follow the G League, the ones who support and come on the page, those are the ones that are really like super into basketball and like the devout fans, So And fortunately, through my page, I was able to get in contact with some people in the G League, and I was able to land a job with them last year. So it's been able to,
Oh, so
accomplish
you're
some.
working with them officially now?
Yes,
Okay,
right. For
okay.
about a year, a little over a year, I've been officially working with the G League. So that's been, one of my goals. And that was really sort of even one of the reasons why I started the page too, was I was like, I had some interviews with the G League prior to that, right? I had ones with the 87ers. I would always go to their games. I met some people, had interviewed with the 87ers, a couple other teams. I didn't land it. So I was like, next time I get an interview, I'll have something to talk about that's G League related. So, through that, I
Right.
was able to get into the league, which has been cool.
Nah, that's been awesome, man. It's been really cool to see your success, man. Like I said, we've been knowing each other for a couple of years,
Right,
back and forth.
right.
Yeah, it's really been cool to see like the growth of what you've been doing, man. Really, really appreciate that for sure.
Yeah, I appreciate it, man. Appreciate it.
So for a lot of people, they don't even know like what technically the G League is. They just know the NBA, and then playing over. A lot of people know about Europe, EuroLeague and stuff like this. But can you explain like what the G League is, and also this new thing, the Ignite? What also the Ignite program is? Can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, for sure. So the G League is the developmental league for the NBA. So, pretty much all the second rounders, the non-drafted players, D2 players, D3 players, even some JUCO guys, overseas guys that are looking to get to the NBA, they all use the G League as a platform to be seen by teams, to develop like all the young guys that are from the second round or two-way guys that really, are 1 or 2 years away from probably contributing at the NBA level. They go to the G League, work on their skills, get a ton of run. That's the thing about the G League, is that you can either warm the bench as a second round rookie in the NBA, right? Just warm the pine every single game, or you can go to the G League and play 30, 40 minutes, take 20 shots, score 30 points, right? And get reps that way. So it's been great for the young guys to be able to develop through the G League. And to tell you the truth, over the years, the G League has become the platform that older NBA veterans use to get back into the NBA, right? And we've
Right,
seen that
right.
so much over the last 2 years, where Lance Stevenson, Isaiah Thomas, these guys who are established NBA names, Greg Monroe, Brandon Knight, they say, you know what? They might be a little bit past their prime, but they still have something to give to the NBA. I'm going to go to the G League, score 20 points, dish out 10 assists, right? Show people that I can still really ball out. And then hopefully I can get a 10-day or, deal for the remainder of the season, a standard deal, or whatever the case is. So that's what the G League has done the last few years. And it's really transformed the way people think about young talent. You know what I mean? And because like I said before, all these second rounders, all these, guys who were undrafted would just sit on the bench. No one even knew what they were doing, right? No one knew their skill set, no
Right.
nothing. And so it's really a chance for these fans and for scouts to say, hey, listen, if you give them playing time, this is what they can do. This is what they specialize in, right? Not all the players transfer well to the NBA, right? There's a lot of guys in the G League that it's weird how it works. A lot of guys in the G League that put up 25 points a game, and they might only average 2 in the NBA, right? And then there's guys that average
Right.
12 points in the G League, and they specialize in a certain thing, and they go to the NBA level and they can get 20 minutes, right? Because they specialize in a certain type of skill set, right? And so it's weird how the G League works, but I think that's the interesting thing too, is that you never know really who's going to shine and who's not going to when they get that NBA call up. As far as the Ignite program is the developmental team of young guys, teenagers who are basically the best young prospects or some of the best young prospects in the world, right? And not just America, in the
Right.
world. We got guys from Australia, guys from other parts of the globe, Africa. And so they come all together, and they're coached by Jason Hart. He's been the coach for the last couple of years. Brian Shaw, NBA champion, was the coach the first
Yeah,
year.
yeah.
They all come together, and basically the Ignite program is unique because it's not just young guys. I think that's what a lot of people think. It's just all these young guys playing on one team. It's a mixture of the young guys and veterans too, right? NBA veterans, overseas veterans, guys that have been around the game for 10 years, right? Know what it takes to be a pro. And these guys mentor them. Now, these guys still have a lot to offer in terms of skill set and game. John Jenkins has become one of my favorite players in the G League this year. And he's been in the G League for many years prior to that. But this year, he's a guy who was a first-round NBA pick years ago. He's played, in and out of the NBA for a number of years. Now he comes to Ignite. He's a guy that Scoot Henderson, who's projected to be the number 2 pick this year, is going to learn from, right? He's 30 years old, 31 years old, can still average 20 points per game, but has that maturity about him where these young guys can be like, okay, this is what it takes to be a pro at the next level, right? And so the Ignite program, it's produced a lot of probably the young players in the league now that a lot of people like that they don't know played for Ignite, like Jalen Green. Probably a lot of
Right.
Warriors fans don't even know that Kuminga played for Ignite, or if they do, they don't really even know what Ignite is, But I would
Right.
say Ignite, it's only in its third year. It's a work in progress, and I think over the last 3 years, it's gotten much bigger. Every year it gets much bigger. Every year it gets more and more notoriety. Jalen Green having played for them was huge that first year in the bubble. Now Scoot, the last 2 years, has been huge as well, just because he's projected to go so high. But yeah, it's giving the young guys an option to forego college, make a ton of money. They're all making six figures. And then eventually, after 1 year, or in Scoot's case, 2 years, they're ready for the NBA draft.
So their salaries, they're actually making more playing with the Ignite than they are playing on a normal G League team?
Yes. So all the Ignite guys are making six figures. The G League guys, that's the unique thing about the G League. So the standard G League deal is for 40,000, right? And that it doesn't seem
Okay.
like it's a lot, but it's about a 5 month or 6 month season.
Okay.
40,000 is the standard deal. Which, if you ask guys like Andre Ingram, he's the G League GOAT, right? When he first started playing in the G League, they were probably making $14,000, right? When he got called up to the Lakers back in, was it 2018? His contract was like for $20,000 a year. So now it's 40, and now it's pretty much double. The guys back in the day will be jealous of what the guys are making now, even though in the grand scheme of basketball contracts, it doesn't seem like it's that much.
Okay. Okay. That's very interesting. So when you're talking about the 10-day contracts,
Mhm.
going in as an assignment player
Right.
or a guaranteed contract, what's the difference between those three things?
Yeah, so in the G League, you get a mixture of everything. You get the guys who are on standard G League deals, which like I said, is $40,000, right? Then you have the two-way guys, and the two-way guys are signed by the NBA team, but essentially majority of them, and there's exceptions like Anthony Lamb right now, he's playing really well for Golden State. He's not going to see any time in Santa Cruz. There's exceptions where some of the two-way guys do play really well, and they stay with the big club, but most of them go to the G League, right? They go to the G League, they're kind of back and forth. Whenever the NBA team needs an extra body, they'll call him up for a game or two, then they send him back to the G League. So those are the two-way contracts. And then there's the assignees, right, which are, they're on standard NBA deals. They're on full NBA deals, the assignees.
Okay.
But they get sent down just because, they might not be playing, or even if they're not playing well at the NBA level, they get sent down to the G League. And that could be for just one game. That could be for 5 games, like with James Wiseman, right? James Wiseman is on a standard NBA deal. He's considered an assignee, right? Because he was sent down to Santa Cruz for maybe it was like 6 or 7 games, played. He's not an official, like, I guess he's an official G Leaguer in terms of he's in the G League, but I don't really count him as like a G League player. You know what I mean? He's an NBA
Right.
player
Right. I got
who
you.
just
He
spending
has his
time
deal.
in the G League, right?
I got you. I got you. Okay. Well, that's very interesting. I think that type of stuff is like not a lot of stuff that people actually know.
Right.
That type of information, like what that stuff, how the guys are actually handling these type of things. So that's very interesting.
For
Man.
sure. For
I
sure.
read a fact that it's like about 54% of the teams have players on their roster with G League experience, and from the past couple of years, it just keeps growing and growing. So I think that's also amazing to see, like the growth of where the D League has progressed into the G League and how far that's gone since, only a couple of years, right?
Right. Yeah, 54% of the NBA is playing the G League, and I think people would be shocked to know that. I mean, I don't think that number is
Right.
publicized as enough as it should be, right? I mean, half the league
Right.
was in the G League, and now there's a lot of guys that played like one game in the G League, but it still counts, right? They
Yeah, for
still
sure.
spent some time. Marcus Smart only played one game for the Maine Celtics, right back when they were the Maine Red Claws. Malik Monk only played one game for the Greensboro Swarm, right? But it still shows that, hey, the Swarm, the Celtics, they're still willing to use their G League programs, even if it's just for 1 or 2 games, right? But yeah, it's just a number that doesn't get talked about enough, and it's only going to grow. That's the biggest thing, is that it's only going to grow.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
G League, I always think this, I'm a big history buff when it comes to basketball, right? I think that part of being a big basketball fan is also knowing the history, right? And a lot of that is me knowing G League history too. And I would say the league is only 20 years old, right? 2001,
Right.
2002, the 2001, 2002 season was the first season in G League history. And so the league is only 20 years old, 21 years old. I'm curious to see like where it goes in the next 10 years. You know what I mean? Because it's still in its like startup phase, right? Where like the first 10 years, it got really no publicity. Call ups really weren't happening quite as often. You didn't really see, and also there weren't that many G League teams back then, right? So whereas now,
Right.
only two NBA teams don't have a G League team, which is the Suns and Blazers. The only two teams don't have a G League team. So the
So what
league
is it
is
now? So what is it now? You have about 30 teams now, or
30
how
teams.
many
Yes,
G League?
it's
Okay.
30 teams. There's 28 affiliated with an NBA team, and then the
Okay.
Ignite team is not affiliated, and also the Mexico City Capitanes are not affiliated.
Okay.
And so,
Okay.
yeah,
Okay.
but yeah, I'm excited to see where the league goes because it's 54% now. You give it 5 years, you know what I mean? It could be up to 60%, right? 10 years from now, they might send all rookies down to the G League. You never know. You know what I mean? Like
Right.
any
Right.
rookie that is not like a top 10 pick or whatever the case is, they might just be like, hey, go to the G League for a little bit and develop, right? So we could be talking about like 75% of the league, within the next 10 years could be like former G League players or, guys who are going in and out of the G League.
Okay, very interesting. So I have a question too. So let's say a guy who's was very high ranked coming out of high school or coming out of college, and they go to the G League and they underperform. How hard do you think it is to bounce back? Let's say the next year is a great year. Do you think it's a lot of teams that kind of write off the player after he's had like one bad year? It's very hard to get out that hole.
Yeah, that's tough, just in sports in general. You've earned a reputation, life in general, right? Once you've earned a reputation, I think it's hard to kind of maneuver away from that if people have made their mind up on you already, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And we've seen that in the G League too with some guys that maybe their NBA careers didn't pan out because of a certain reason, maybe the attitude issues or whatever, and they didn't get called up even though they were playing well. People think they're still that guy. You know what I mean?
Yes. Yeah.
And it's unfortunate how it works that way because people do, people change, right? Like when you the thing is that when people are getting drafted to the NBA, some of them are 18 years old. They're 19 years old. These guys are kids, right? They're kids. They
Yeah.
think like kids. They've been pampered their whole lives, right? They think they're stars. People on Instagram are praising them and how cool they are. They have hundreds of thousands of followers. You're not going to be fully mature at 18, 19 years old, 20 years old coming into the league. The thing about the league is that you really get like one shot, right? One or two shots or whatever, right? And then once they made up their mind about you, you can't play, you have a bad attitude, you're a bad teammate, then they cast you aside. Then these guys are going to the G League at age 25, which is still super young, right? They're still super, super young. And then in our heads, because they were drafted so young, they've been around for 6 years, we think of them as like washed up. You know what I mean? It's just weird how
Yeah,
that
most
works. But
definitely.
yeah, it's one of those things where unfortunately, once they made up their mind about you, and I've seen that in the G League a lot. Like this guy's deserving of a call up, but his reputation, right, won't allow for that to happen. Right? They rather not take the risk and maybe take a guy who's a little bit less talented that they know won't be a headache. I've even heard of guys in the G League back during the D League days, right, who were putting up some really crazy numbers, right? We're winning awards. We're on the first or second team in the D League, right? And they just might not have been the best teammate. And, I've heard stories about that of certain guys. They weren't the best teammate. They didn't represent themselves the right way, and then for whatever reason, they were passed upon on NBA call-ups, right? And these are guys who were in the G League for years and years and years. And yeah, it's unfortunate how it works, but that's just a thing in life too. You know what I mean? They'll do that in a regular job, and
Most
they'll definitely do
definitely.
that in the NBA.
Most definitely. I think it takes a lot. You got to have everything on point, especially when you make it to a level. It can be literally one thing that can hold you back from
Right.
making it to where you want to get to, right?
For sure. For sure.
So you definitely feel like the G League's made like a lot of, let's say, good exposure to get guys to that next level.
Yeah.
Let's say, for instance, who's some of your favorite players that you've seen over the years play from the G League and then seen them have success in the NBA? Who's some of the favorite guys that you've seen?
Oh man, that's a great question. I mean, I remember watching the D League finals back in 2017 when Fred VanVleet and Pascal Siakam were playing for the Raptors 905, and to tell you the
Tough,
truth,
tough.
like it's one of those things where, it's tough to say, oh, these guys are going to end up being NBA All-Stars, or I don't know if I saw NBA All-Star out of either of them, right? But it's cool to see how they took a situation where they were in the D League, and like I was telling you before, they go to the D League as a rookie, and these guys are 40 minutes a year. I'd rather be playing 40 minutes in the D League than be playing no minutes in the NBA, right? And so they went
Right.
to the D League. They were both averaging 20 points for the Raptors 905. They led the Raptors 905 to the 2017 championship. Jerry Stackhouse was their coach that year, and then it's been cool to see like them rise from that, and then they won the championship in 2019. But neither of them were like stars back then. They were just really good, nice and upcoming players, and now they're just bona fide stars, right, in the league. And Fred VanVleet was an all-star last year. Pascal's been an all-star before too. I think those two are probably some of my favorites. Spencer Dinwiddie too, because Spencer Dinwiddie, he was with the Windy City Bulls, and then he was with the Grand Rapids Drive too, right? And so I remember both those seasons where he's put up numbers, and like I said, it was one of those things where you never expect him to eventually be a 20 points per game NBA player. But I remember looking at Spencer and being like, yeah, I could definitely see this guy getting 13, 14 a game at the NBA level,
Okay.
So it's cool to see how they've taken situations where, no one really knew about them, and then they've turned that into hundreds of $1 million worth of NBA contract money and, all-star appearances and awards and stuff like that. Even now, like, I love watching the guys now, knowing that some of them, and, I'm wrong on a lot of these, like, predictions. Like, I could say, oh, maybe this guy will be a star, maybe that guy, and half the time I'm wrong because it's hard to tell. I think a landing
For sure.
spot is really important too. You know what I mean? Like where you land, how the
What
team
role
uses
you're gonna
you, yeah,
play?
what role you play. Oh, I mean, my favorite, I think everyone else's favorite too, is probably Gary Payton II, right? Like when
Okay.
Gary
Yeah.
Payton
Yeah.
was in the G League, and this is when he was playing with like South Bay and he was playing with Rio Grande Valley. I was like, I just don't see how this guy is not on an NBA roster simply just because of like how hard he competes, right? Like
Hmm.
the biggest question about him was like, oh, can he shoot? And he still really is not a knockdown shooter or anything like that. But sometimes I'm like, okay, let's take shooting out of the equation because there's a lot of guys in the G League now that are not knockdown shooters, but they offer the same thing that Gary Payton offered, the type of energy, the
Right.
type of defensive hustle. I'm like, okay, everyone nowadays just looks at shooting, right? Well, take that out of the equation. This guy does everything else, right? He's a smart player. He knows when to cut. Um, he doesn't need the ball to score, right? He's as a guard, he's a great rebounder. He's an amazing defender, right? Like all
Yeah.
those
Good
intangibles,
teammate.
good,
Yep.
great teammate, right?
Yep.
All those
Hmm.
intangibles are worthy of an NBA contract, but everyone's just so wrapped up in, oh, what's his 3-point percentage? You know what I mean? But those guys, and like I said, my biggest thing that I like is I like the guys who have played multiple years in the G League. You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
guys
Yeah.
that grinded for 3 years. In Gary Payton's case, he was in the G League for 5 years, right? So guys that grinded in the G League for multiple years, and then there's a light at the end of the tunnel. They get their call up and they end up shining. Spencer Dinwiddie played multiple years. One of my favorites now is Alize Johnson, right? Who's like in his 4th year in the G League now, and he's on the Wisconsin Herd right now. And I
Okay.
remember a couple years ago he got called up after being with Fort Wayne and being with the 905. And then within like 3 or 4 games into getting called up, he had a 2020 game with the Nets. You know what I mean? So it's
Right.
been,
Right. Right.
so there's a lot of guys like that. There's a lot of guys who I really root for. I root for all the G League guys, to tell you the truth, Elijah, because I want them all to succeed, like the real G League guys, not necessarily like, I guess the two-way guys count too, and the assignment guys sort of count, but the hardcore G League guys that are making the 40,000 standard deals, I'm really rooting for those guys because that money that they get on a 10-day or whatever, that's life changing for them, right? So, but yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how these current guys, what they end up becoming, because there's a guy in the G League right now who could become Fred VanVleet, who could become Pascal Siakam, Rudy Gobert. So it's going to be interesting to see that.
Most definitely. I think the G League is a place where, quote me if I'm wrong, but I'm trying to think of another sport that you can actually have 10 guys on one team that are all competing for a job.
Right.
You're asked to play together, but also show your best. I mean, you look at it from high school. all these guys were superstar. Shouldn't say superstars, but all these guys were the top guys on their high school team,
Right.
or college. These guys were the top guys on their college team, and then you go to the G League and you got to be a top guy with competing with 10 other top guys to get a spot. I think that's like, people don't really think about that grind. Like, it's a different type of grind. There's only one ball, and all these guys are asked to, do your best. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the most interesting thing about that too is like I do have friends in the G League that are players and everything like that. Some current, some former, and they were telling me that the case for all situations. You know what I mean? But it's like everyone's competing for that call up, right? So you can't really almost be friends with them, to a degree.
Yeah.
It's crazy. Like of course, like you don't hate the guy, right? But hey, listen, like there's one NBA roster spot open on the Pacers or on the Nets or on the Wizards, and I want that spot, right? Like, it's hard to root for a guy, your teammate, right? Let's say that, hey, you have 20, but your teammate had 28, right? All of a sudden, your 20 never gets talked about. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So that's what I think about all the time. When you're doing highlights and a guy has 40 points in the G League, it's like, wait a minute now. If he had 40, that means he's stopping another guy from not having a job too, right?
Yeah, right. And the thing is that I always say, like, always ends up prevailing. You know what I mean? Like, and it might take a couple years, but there's some guys that right now they're playing behind someone that's more talented than them, right? Maybe they give the G League another year, and next year they can shine, or the year after that. You know what I mean? Actually, Elijah, I totally forgot to mention this guy when I was talking about my favorite ones. Is Christian Wood?
Who's that? Oh, okay, that's a good one. Okay,
Christian Wood guy.
How many years? He was only 1 year in the G League, or
he was
played
4
more?
years.
4 years.
He was 4 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's tough.
He was 4 years, 3 different teams, and so somewhere on my Instagram, I have a picture of myself and Christian Wood. It was probably like 2016 or 2017, and he was playing for the Delaware 87ers at the time. And he was a nobody, right? No one knew who he was. No one in the NBA was like, "Oh, we need Christian Wood," right? And that's probably one of my favorite pictures, just because of how much life has changed for him over the past 4 years since that picture was taken. Now he's in the NBA. He's a 20 and 10 guy, right? Last year for the Rockets, he was 20 and 10, and this year, he's doing really well with the Mavericks, and it's kind of cool to see, where he was 4 years ago. Like I said, 4 years in the G League, that's crazy, right? And so, but yeah, he was one of my favorites too. But yeah, going back to what you were saying before, man, the competition level in the G League, these guys play much harder than they do in the NBA, and it's hard to measure that, right? It's hard to measure that. That's kind of like an eye test thing. But these guys are like, there's guys playing 94 feet of defense in the G League, right? There's guys that, it's interesting because the NBA season's so long. In game 40 of the regular season, these guys are not running off the screen.
It's a different speed.
Right. They're not fighting through screens as hard as they can, because they're like, I got 40 more games of this, right? In the G League, these guys are running through screens. These guys are like, actual dogs, right? So, because they want that one or, 2 open spots on an NBA franchise, right? So, but yeah, and that's, like I said, it's hard to measure that though. But in my opinion, these guys play harder, and that's because the competitive nature of these guys and how little opportunity there is sometimes. There's 1 or 2 spots available. It results in that.
Okay, most definitely. So when guys are on the normal contracts in the G League, it's just a 1 year contract. It's not multiple years, correct?
Right. It's just 1 year. Right. It's just 1 year.
Okay. Definitely. That's definitely that's definitely tough, right? Because it really keeps you on your toes with just giving guys 1 year. Like, do what you're supposed to do, or find the next player to fill you in, right?
Right. And Elijah, you going back to contracts, like, I think that's where the league could maybe evolve one day, right? Where we see guys, as the pay raise, as the pay continues to increase, it's 40,000 now. Maybe in 5 years, it's like 90,000, right? Who knows?
Right.
But I would not be surprised if that contracts evolve. If in a couple of years, it's like, oh, we're going to sign you to like a 2-year G League deal. You know what I mean? You'll be with our franchise for 2 years. We'll see what you can offer. You know what I mean? The same way they do at the NBA level and stuff like that.
Okay, okay. Yeah, definitely. That was that's always was a thought. You know, when I came out, had a chance to try to go to it was D League at the time. And that was the main thing I was looking at was all right, security.
Right,
How is it gonna be, you know?
right.
But yeah, definitely different. So like I want to go back to this topic again because it really is something I always think about. Is like the security of a player when he comes out of, you know, top program. Let's say he went to Duke or something like this.
Yeah.
You know, when you go to G League, you're asked to be you know, not that superstar anymore. Do you think that is a very difficult thing for players that you see, like them adjusting to that? Do you think a lot of players adjust to that really easy, to from being that top guy to, you know, as being asked to play with with other guys that are doing basically the same thing? You find players that, you know, have a struggle with that?
Yeah, it depends on person to person. I would say this: there's situations in the G League, and those who are coming from top programs, right? I always say that if you're coming from Kentucky or a Power Five school, or even major school, it doesn't even matter. Are run like pro programs, professional programs, where the coach expects you to be at a certain place on time. You can't be tardy. You have to be at study hall on time. You can't be tardy. Film on time, right? They expect you to do like extracurriculars in the community. So I think for a lot of these guys, the transition really isn't that much different. With the living
Okay.
conditions now in the G League are really good, right? Where these guys are getting really nice apartments. They're getting apartments to themselves, right? And if you have a family, you can get a bigger space. Back in the day, back when it was
That's
the G League,
changed.
these guys were living four per apartment. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
you
yeah.
were basically it was like college all over again, right? But how the D League, from the D League to the G League, has evolved is the living conditions are so much better now, right? Where it's almost like they're living sort of like a pro, right? Not an NBA pro, but still a very good lifestyle. Now, a lot of situations where guys draft picks in the NBA, and for whatever reason, it's not working for them in the NBA, and they get assigned to the G League, and these guys mope around, and they're not necessarily, um, they're not necessarily putting on their best performance or their best effort because they're in their head kind of thing, thinking I shouldn't be in the G League, right? I can't name the name because I'm working for the league now. If I
Yeah,
wasn't working for the league now, I
yeah.
would say it. But there was a guy that I recently was just in the city, and a guy had been assigned to the G League. He's a top pick, and it was funny because I was hearing from the staff and everything like that. Like, yeah, he's really mad that he's back in the G League, and you could see it in his like body language and his effort out there. The team got killed, right? And usually when you're getting killed, there's like a look on your face that's not a look of like I don't care, right? Just like the body language that he portrayed wasn't very good. You know what I mean? And so, but there's
Most
situations like that,
definitely.
and I can see why. Why? Hey, listen, I'm a top 10 pick, top 20 pick, right? I should not be in the G League, right? Especially for like a second or third year, right? I can see that, but that's where it falls on the player. Like, hey, maybe you're not improving the way that the team thought you would, right? Maybe you need to put more work in the gym, right? Um, so there are definitely situations like that. But then there's other situations too where a guy gets sent down to the G League. Dalen Terry is an example. He was a first round pick this year by the Bulls. Wasn't really playing that much. He asked to go down to the G League,
Oh,
RJ
okay.
Hampton, yeah, RJ Hampton was a first round pick in 2019 by the Magic, asked to go to Lakeland because he was like, I'm not getting any run in Orlando. I might as well send me to Lakeland where I'm going to put up 30 a game. And he has been putting up, 25 a game, right? So he's like, I might as well just get run down there, stay fresh, so that when the opportunity comes, I'm ready. You know what I mean? So I think that's what separates a ball player from a pro, right? Is that there's a lot of guys, all these guys are ball players, right? But not all of them are professionals, right? And that's what separates some from the others. That's why some succeed and some don't. And just to go on that a little bit, Elijah, uh, Siakam recently had a quote where he was talking to Christian Coloco, who's the Raptors rookie this year. And Christian
Okay.
was assigned to the Raptors on '05. And he told Christian, he said, the ones who go to the G League and complain and mope never make it back, right? Use this opportunity, take it seriously, get your playing time, focus on improving, right? And then come back when you're ready. You know what I mean? And as a guy that went through that same process, 100% true. You know what I mean? These guys come down to the G League and they're like, "Oh, I shouldn't be here. I'm too good for this." It's like, no, you're not. There's a reason why they sent you down. There's a reason
The
why you're not
reason.
playing at the NBA level. So, like I said, it varies from person to person, but the ones who take it seriously are usually the ones that end up succeeding.
That's great right there. What you said, man. That's good stuff. I hope somebody definitely will hear that, man.
For
That's some
sure.
good stuff right
For
there.
sure.
Good. So what's the next step for you, man? What you got? What's the next thing for you that you're doing?
Yeah, for me, my thing now is like my goal was to work in the G League. And it's funny because my goal was even to work in the NBA. It was just to work in the G League, right? If you ask anybody who works in college basketball or whatever, or works in high school basketball, everyone's dream is to make the NBA. But when I fell in love with the G League, when it was the D League, I was like, oh man, I really want to work in the G League. So now that I'm here,
Right,
I'm
right.
really trying to make the most out of my time and find out like where I can stand out the most, where I can make the most impact, And I've only been at the G League for about a year and about 3 months, so it hasn't really been
Okay.
that long. But I'm trying to just meet everybody that works in the G League, that works for teams. The thing is that my boss, he lets me travel everywhere, right? And so he's given me a lot of like really great opportunities. This past week, I was in Iowa. The week before that, I was in Greensboro with the Swarm. The week before that, I was in Fort Wayne with the Mad Ants, and then Wednesday, I'm going to Lakeland to be with the Magic, right? So they've given me a lot of opportunities to travel and meet people, and experience like the real like G League kind of lifestyle, right? How these guys live, what their personalities are like, and so I love connecting with these guys on that level as well. I would say like it's interesting. The G League doesn't have like the NBA has so many personalities, right? The
Right.
NBA has so many people who cover the league, so many media personalities, so many like executives, coaches, players that people know and respect and everything like that. I kind of want to be like a G League personality, not, and I don't really know, not like a Stephen A kind of thing, right? But I want to be just, you know,
On a positive
on
vibe
a
though.
positive, right, elevating the league, and try to I mean, just someone that's known for like, helping expand the league. And when you think of me, I want people to think of like the G League, right? Like, oh, Jeff's like, oh, he's the guy that works in the G League, you know what I mean? Because it's
Yeah,
kind of
yeah,
been
yeah.
my identity over the last few years, right? Where when I was a fan, I was going to games and I was talking to all the staff, and hopefully trying to make connections to get a job and stuff like that, right? And I remember one
Yeah.
game, Malcolm Turner was the old G League president, and he went to a game, and I had a conversation with him, and I got his number, and he and I had a long phone conversation, and he ended up leaving to go to Vanderbilt. But you know what I mean? So like the G League has always been like kind of my goal, and I just want to like make the most of it while I'm here and the time I have with the league and everything.
That'd be awesome. That'd be awesome. So what do you think? You think it could ever be a G League overseas? I think about that all the time. Do you think it'd
Yeah.
ever be like an expansion type of program where you have these players playing, a couple games overseas also that are counted as their G League games?
That's interesting for like G League teams. Like if for overseas
Yeah.
teams have a G League team. Yeah, that's interesting. I don't know because it depends so much on money, right? So much of it
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
is like finance because it's financed by the NBA franchises. They have an excess amount of money where they can spend on it and everything like that. And then the league is
Mhm.
really invested in the G Leagues. They pour a lot of revenue and resources into it as well. I you know the biggest thing that it comes down to money, and also I think another thing is like how much people would care about it, right? Because it took the G
That
League
too.
at least 10 years, 15 years for people to really start being like, oh wow, like this league actually has legitimate talent, right? This league is
Yeah. Yeah.
actually producing NBA players that are not warming the bench. These guys are going to NBA teams and contributing, right? And so for these franchises and these leagues to overseas leagues to be investing in the G League or in a variation of the G League, it'd be hard because they'd probably have to wait like a decade before they saw any results. The thing about the
I
NBA is
think
like
that too.
I always think with the NBA, once they put their name on something, once they fully invest in something, it might not succeed right away, but it's the NBA. It's going to eventually take off, right? I think the same thing with the
Right.
Ball League, the Basketball Africa League, right? That's backed by the NBA as well. It's in its second year, third year. It's in its third year right now, and it's not something that's very well known right now. But you give it like 5 years, 8 years or whatever, and people will really start paying attention to the
It
Ball
will
League just
be.
because the league will find out different ways of promoting it and things of that nature.
Definitely, definitely. That's dope. Okay. Okay. Well, shoot, man. I'm trying to think of any other questions I have, man. You gave me a lot of a lot of great information. um, yeah. Anything else you got to say, man?
Man, I just encourage everybody to go to watch the G League, right? It's one of those things where, it's to tell you the truth, a lot of people think to themselves like, "Oh, the G League is like second tier type of talent," right? But it's really not, right? It's just like it's the next branch of or batch of guys who are going to be contributors at the NBA level, right? So it's like you get on board with them while they're young, and then they make it to the NBA and they end up playing well. You can be one of those guys that was like, "Oh, I remember watching him before he really blew up." You know what I mean? And then also going to a G League game, like if you live in one of those cities and you're a parent or you're just a basketball fan, you go to those games, it's like $10 a ticket, right? And it's a
Oh, it's
real
okay.
yeah, it's a real basketball environment where they have halftime entertainment. They have, some have cheerleaders, right? They have team merchandise stores. They have, the mascot shooting the cannon of t-shirts into the stands, right? So it's not like, a high school basketball environment or like a mid-major, low-major D1 basketball environment. It is a pro basketball environment where you can really enjoy the game and then also the atmosphere as well. And then the cool thing about G League games is that a lot of teams do this where after the weekend games, the Friday games, the whole team comes out and they sign autographs, right? They take pictures with the fans. And so I know if you're a kid and you want to meet a ball player and you probably can't do it at an NBA level, right, without having to pay $400 a ticket to go sit in the lower levels, right? You go to a
Right,
G
right,
League
right.
game and you go meet the team's rookie for free. I'm not free for $10, right? And then for
ten
after the
bucks,
game, you can meet him for free, right? It's one of those things where like if you're a young basketball fan or you're just a basketball fanatic, you can get all access to these players at a tenth of the cost. You know what I mean? So I
That's
really
awesome.
encourage people to go to games, go watch them on the G League website or ESPN Plus. It's only going to take off, right? And it's one of those things too where like I always think to myself that the ones who follow the G League, right, are like the real basketball fans, right? So if you consider yourself a real basketball fan, there's no excuse for you not to know anything about the G League.
Right, 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 right. Shoot, definitely. Everybody definitely go out and support. I think that's awesome that, be able to get that hands-on type of feeling,
Right,
that, you'll pay a lot of money to usually get something like that. So
right,
I
right.
think that's definitely awesome. Now, I think definitely, like you said, in the next couple of years, it's going to keep on building and getting bigger and getting bigger. And yeah, I'm excited to see where it's going.
Yeah, yeah. It's only going to get bigger. Yeah, and I'd say give it 5 years, and then Elijah, in 10 years, I want to have
Yeah.
another podcast episode. Right, 5 years, not 10 years. 10 years too long. 5 years, another
All right.
podcast episode. Right, guys are making 40,000 now. You know what I mean? It's a 1 year, a 6 month deal basically. Maybe in 5 years, they have 2 year deals, 3 year deals, right? They're making $90,000 a year, $100,000 a year. The same way, and it's interesting. Like we always hear about fighting for WNBA players to have higher salaries, but we never hear anything about
Right.
G League players having
G
higher
League.
salaries. They
That's
never
true.
say.
That's true.
Like the
Don't
G
hear
League,
anything. No complaints.
no complaints. You know what I mean? They take their 40,000. They're like, oh, it's an opportunity for me to be seen. You know what I mean? And hopefully they get a call up. And once you get a 10 day, then you're basically making a combined like $100,000 because I think during the 10 days you get like if it's your first 10 day it's like 50,000 something like that, or 40,000
How
something like
many
that. So
how many 10 days can you get?
with a team you can get 3 consecutive 10 days, and then they
Three.
gotta sign you or cut you. So that's
Okay.
the max
Okay.
is three consecutive 10 days.
And that has to be in a row, the three consecutive,
Oh
or you
no, no,
mean
no.
just three throughout the season?
Yeah, yeah, three throughout the season, and then they have to figure out what to do with you after that. You know what I mean? But like last year was the COVID season, so we saw a lot of guys where they would get signed for a 10 day, Another guy would go out with COVID. Then they keep him for another 10 day. Then maybe another guy would go out. Then they keep him for the third 10 day. But then after the third, it's like, okay, now you're back to the G League because we don't want to sign you for the rest of the season, right? We're just kind of using you until these guys get healthy again, you know?
I see.
But
I
yeah,
see.
so yeah,
Okay.
but we'll see how that changes in the next 5 years or so.
Yeah, that's interesting, man. Looking forward to seeing it, man. Looking forward to seeing
For
it.
sure.
Well, man, I really, really appreciate you taking the time out, man. Really been looking forward to this. A lot of good information. Yeah, I really appreciate it, man.
Yeah, definitely, Elijah. Yeah, man. And it's cool to see like where you and I, I remember we messaged each other when you were doing Lemonade highlights too. And, what I mean? We're both on a very similar journey where we're still in the game and trying to make the most out of it too. You know what I mean? So I'm wishing you all the best on all your endeavors and your goals as well, because, I have a lot of the same goals too.
For sure. And I know for you, I don't even know if you think about this, but it definitely goes full circle for you with the highlight thing, because it's more than just the G League. You with them making the highlights for the players, these guys are also getting jobs overseas from just
Right.
maybe a coach seeing the highlight video like, oh, who is this player? Let me check him out, because you're spotlighting the player. So I think that's why it's like more of a just posting a video, on Instagram. It's like, yo, you're actually giving guys opportunities that, can go really full circle. So,
Yeah, for sure.
It's really a touching thing for sure.
For sure. And I hope that, coaches, I know coaches follow because, I talk to them through like DMs and stuff like that. And it's crazy because one year, this was last year, one of the G League coaches hit me up before the G League draft. And he was like, what are some names that you'd recommend? And I was like, I can't believe that he asked me to recommend. You know what I mean? Like, it was just interesting because like I was like, wow, like this guy's a G League coach, and he's asking me, and I wasn't. I mean, I can play ball and stuff like that, but I was not. I was a manager in college, right? So I was a student manager at the for the basketball team in college, and I was a grad assistant. Like I never like was that good at playing, right? I can play, but I was never like close to playing college, no, nothing like that, right? So it was cool when I got that text. I was like, whoa, that's so interesting that a guy that has very little athleticism, right? That they'd still want my recommendation or whatever the case is.
Yeah, but I mean, you've done so many videos that you really got the eye for it. You start to see, what separates players from other players because you're doing so many videos. You start to see like, oh, he's moving a little bit different than usual.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, he can do this a little better. You start to really see it the more and more you do the work. You've been doing it for years, so
for sure.
Hey, who better to go to than that?
Yeah, for sure. But it was like I just thought it was real cool. You know what I mean? And I hope these guys. I hope that I can use the G League's platform and also my G League TV platform as just a way to like elevate these guys. Like you said, it might not be in the G League, it might not be in the NBA, but if it's overseas somewhere, and sometimes guys just hit me up and they're like, I played like 4 years ago, and I just want something like for my memories.
Yeah, for sure.
And I'm like, there was this one player, and he was like, yeah, I played in the G League back in like 2015. He was like, could you just send me some of my highlights, like so I can show my kids? I was like, yeah, sure. It's, no problem at all, right? But it's like one of those things where it's like, I hope that the fans enjoy it, the players hopefully can use it, and then the coaches and staffers get something out of it too.
Game.
One of the coolest things about the G League, I think too, is how many people use the G League to get to the NBA that are not players, right? Staffers, coaches, equipment managers, trainers, marketing people, ticket sales people, right? They all use the G League as a way to get to the NBA and like further their careers. I know plenty of people that worked in the G League for years, right? And they had nothing to do with the product on the court, right? They were all behind the scenes, right? In marketing and social media and ticket sales. And then now they're working for ticket sales for the Pacers, right? Media for the Sixers, you know what I'm saying? And so the G League has opened a lot of opportunities for guys and girls that are not, just involved in the ball type, right? They're involved in like different aspects of the organization. They help make the engine run, right? And so that's one thing about the G League that I think doesn't get enough credit for, is just how they've produced like pros, NBA caliber employees that are aside from the ball players.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. So it's almost like, climbing the ladder. You start out in the G League and
Right.
have an opportunity to be seen by this person, get a job interview, and keep moving up the ladder, right?
Right. And for me, I think about it too. Like, I work at the G League office, right? And a lot of people who I work with have the same aspirations too, right? Where they're in the G League
Yeah,
now and they
yeah,
love the G League, but everyone's kind of goal is to work for the big league. You know what I mean? Like just like any player,
for sure.
their goal is to make the NBA. They don't really want to stay in the G League. I think for majority of the employees, like, they love the G League and they love the product that they're putting out. But they're like, if an NBA opportunity opened up, and that always means more money too, right? Everyone, you can never turn that
For
down, man.
sure.
If the G League's paying, 60,000, 70,000, the NBA probably depend, 100,000, right?
Double it. Yeah,
110,000,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
So it's
Yeah,
one of
yeah.
those things where it's like, once that door opens up, man, like you just can't pass on those opportunities. Another really cool thing about the G League is that they have this tryout system, right? Where every team every summer basically hosts open tryouts, right? And there's a range of people who try out, right? Sometimes it's the scrub who plays rec league and they just want to get, one of the free pennies that they get, and they probably get like a water bottle and a t-shirt, right, from the team. And they just want the experience of trying out. And then there's some really serious ball players that try out, whether they're former D1 guys, former overseas pros. So it's one of those things where you go to the tryout and people think, oh, it's bogus, like they never actually pick anybody, right? But there's a lot of people
Right.
who paid the 150, right, which is the cost of trying out. They pay the 150, and they end up getting a G League contract out of it, right? And that, like I said, it's rare, right? It's not like it happens all the time, but I would say that every year there's 10 guys in the G League who were part of the tryout system that ended up not only making the team, but contributing for that team. You know what I mean? And the biggest
Right, right.
one last year was this guy named Craig Randall, right? He tried out for the Salt Lake City Stars. He tried out for the Long Island Nets. He makes the Long Island Nets, right? Starts off the season. He's getting okay playing time. He's in the rotation. Ends up exploding right at the start of the regular season because there's the showcase, right? So during the showcase, he wasn't
Okay.
really getting all his minutes. During the start of the regular season, he goes for like back-to-back 35-point games to start the season. For the year, he averages 26 points per game. He's second in scoring. He wins most improved player. He never got a call-up, which I thought was surprising. But now he's back in the G League. He was playing in Australia. Now he's back in the G League. But he's a guy that used the tryout
Okay.
system as a way to get to the G League, and then it earned him the opportunity he has right now, and almost earned him a chance to making the NBA last year. I think this year he just returned to the G League. He's with the Iowa Wolves, and he's a guy that probably get a call up. I think towards the end of the season. But like I said, you get the range of guys where some of these guys suck and they just want to say that they tried out. Craig Randall wasn't one of those guys. So he wasn't the guy that just hopped off the bed, off the couch, and then came to the G League try. He went to Memphis.
Yeah,
He
yeah,
did play
yeah.
D1. He wasn't a star by any means, right? So it was kind of surprising to see how he went from not being a star in college to just being a flat out star in the G League almost overnight. You know what I mean? But yeah, the G League trial system is really one of the cooler things about the league that doesn't get, I think, enough publicity. And I think a lot of people who are overseas now or in college now, when they're thinking of trying out for the G League, they probably should just give it a shot, right? 150. I mean, all these guys
Yeah,
have
nothing to
150. Yeah,
lose. Yeah.
they have 150, and then at the very least, let's say they do get cut. G League rosters are so back and forth. Like there's so much movement where this guy's on the team today, he's off the team tomorrow. That you never know. Like if you made a good impression at
They
tryouts,
call you.
right? Who knows? Like you might not have made the team then, but they might look and you be like, oh, so and so, yeah, he didn't make the team then, but we need a guard and he's pretty quick, right? And he's a professional in the way he acts and the way that he's a good teammate and stuff like that. We'll just give him a little shot, right? We'll give him, sign him, have him played 2 or 3 games. At least you can say you played in the G League. So
Right, right.
it's one of those things where one story, and I don't want to keep rambling on too much about one
No, you're good.
story that that is one of my favorite stories is I have a friend named Harry Rafferty, right? And Harry played D3 basketball. He averaged like 13, 14 points a game at the D3 level. And Harry
Okay.
was like hell bent on making the G League, right? He tried out for like 5 different teams. And, with 5 different teams, you got to travel to the city. You got to pay the 150.
Right.
Sometimes it's like $200. and he didn't make any of the teams, but he made enough of an impact where, like, he made some of them. He was the final cut. Some of them it was like the third round, right? So he made it far. He was never, he always was the guy that was a finalist to make a team. And
Okay.
I believe this was 2018. The Skyforce at the time, they had a lot of guys getting called up. I think they had some guys getting suspended. They had a bunch of guys that got injured. So they needed like 5 guys right away. Like literally right away. Like tomorrow we need,
Yeah.
5 more guys to fill out the roster. And Harry Rafferty had tried out for their team, and he didn't make the team, and he was working as a substitute teacher, right? Because he hadn't made any of the G League teams. He was working as a sub. And then they called him to go play for the Skyforce. And he only played like
Okay.
3 games, right? And then, the guys that were out end up getting healthy and they're back, or maybe some of the guys that got called up were back on the team. So they didn't need him after the 3 games. But he ended up playing in the G League for 3 games. It was like 3 or 4 games. He scored like a few
awesome.
baskets. He gets a jersey, right? Gets to live out his dream as a D3 player that he made the G League, you know what I mean? And it was all through the tryout system. And like I said, he didn't make it then, but he made it, he made enough of an impact at those tryouts where they said, you know what, he wasn't good enough to make it then, but he's good enough to make it now. We need bodies, right? And so I thought that was a really cool thing. And, when I hear stories about players and they try out and they don't make it, I'm like, you just never know. Like, keep in touch with the coach, keep in touch with the GM, right? Just text them after a win and say, great win, right? Because there might be a time
Right.
where the
Never
whole
know.
team gets COVID, right? Like, the whole bench gets COVID and they need 5 guys right then and there tomorrow, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and then they might call your name. So you just never know.
That's all. That's an awesome story,
Yeah.
man. So you just brought up a guy who had that type of story. Who else is kind of like under the radar in your mind, but you won't be surprised at all to see them in the league this season or next season? Who's like, give me like 3 guys where you're like, I can, I put my bet on these 3 players. Who do you think, man?
Yeah, that's a good one. Everyone's looking for kind of the next Gary Payton II because
That's
of
what I
the
mean.
role
Yeah,
that he
yeah.
fills, where he doesn't need the ball to score, he doesn't need the ball at all to make an impact. You know what I mean? Like, so he can just literally play 20 minutes of defense, not take a single shot in the game, and
And have
impact
an
the game
impact.
so well. So there's 3 guys that come to mind that fill that role like right now, and that's Craig Sword
Okay.
on the Capital City Go-Go, that's Shaq Harrison on the South Bay Lakers, and that's also Nate Pierre-Louis on the South Bay Lakers. All 3 of those guys, they can score, right? They can get to the basket. All 3 of them are super athletic. All 3 of them are similar to Gary, and like everyone, sort of like questions their shot. You know what I mean? Like, oh, what's the,
Mm-hmm.
they're not really consistent shooters, right? But everything else that they offer is like NBA worthy. The hustle that they offer,
Enough. Yeah.
them being a great teammate. There are 3 guys that pick up 94 feet. You know what I mean? Like, they're just hounds on defense. I could see like Jay Huff. Jay Huff is another guy who hasn't played in the NBA yet. He's in his 2nd year in the G League. He's averaging over 4 blocks a game. He's 7'1", runs the floor like a guard, plays well above the rim, shoots 40% from 3, right? He's a guy that a lot of people still don't really even know about. He was at Virginia. He won a national championship with Virginia, but he was never like a superstar player there, And then only in the G League has
Right.
he really been able to truly blossom. I'm looking forward to seeing Sharif Cooper, right? A lot of people look at Sharif and he's a
Yeah.
name
Yeah.
that people knew in high school. And then, the thing about it is that he has so much hype, and so much of a social media following that, his fans like want him in the league, like right now, right? Like sign him. But I really think that if Cooper finds the right home, right, and a team that will value, the thing about him is that he's a ball dominant guard, right? And a lot of the times those don't translate well to like the NBA level from the G League,
Right.
But if he's a guy that, finds the right like role off the bench, he can get you 10 points in 7 minutes, right? He can get you like 5 assists in 10 minutes, you know what I mean? Depending on the role you need him to play. His playmaking is severely underrated. He's a knockdown shooter too. So he's a guy that, even if they want to stick him in the corner, if you gave him a couple open looks, he could knock those down. But I want to see him because he's just, for his fan base, like his fan base is just so rabid, all the people that followed him from high
Right.
school. I would like to see him get his chance. And yeah, he had his 2-way last year with the Hawks. But playing behind Trae Young, you're not going to get that many opportunities. And
Right,
Trae
right.
Young, Lou Williams, you know what I mean? Like it's like, oh, Trae Young, Lou Williams, like you're not going to ever see the court, right? So, but yeah, those are guys that I'm really looking forward to seeing. And then there's a lot of guys too, like Jaden Hardy right now, who's on the Mavericks, right? He fell to the 37th pick. He's been back and forth between the Texas Legends and the Dallas Mavericks. And
Right.
in the NBA, off the bench, he's had multiple like 15-point games. He had like a 20-point game. In the G League, he's 30 points per game every night. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
so
yeah.
he's a guy that I could see like I always thought that he was going to be like a Contavious Caldwell Pope type of player. But
Okay,
now I look
okay.
at him as like a more of a Malik Beasley type, where in a few years I could see him being like a 15 points per game player off the bench. Someone that's like, or even in the starting lineup or off the bench. A guy that's gonna like play hard on both ends of the floor, kind of like an energizer type of guy. So yeah, those guys I would say look forward to. But there's a ton of guys, just like I said, in the G League that put up like sort of average numbers, right? But
Right, right.
like they specialize in certain things, like whether it's shot blocking, defense, passing, or whatever. And so I could see those skills being translatable at the NBA level, whether it's for a 10-day, whether it's for a two-way, or just something like that. It's still transferable for even a short amount of time.
Okay, you brought up a good point. So, what's your feelings on a player should have to be able to do two different things? So, let's say either a 3-and-D guy,
Mm-hmm.
you're do you find that true? That you guys that you see that are getting called up, they're doing more than just one thing. Like you don't just have a shooter, you got to do one more thing to your game too. Do you
Oh
see
yeah,
that a
yeah, for
lot too?
sure, for sure, for sure. I think a lot of teams do look for like the specialty type of guys, but there's a lot of like Swiss Army knife guys. Like Najee Marshall is a good example when
Yeah,
he was
yeah,
playing
okay,
for the Erie Bayhawks, who are no longer a team anymore. But he played for the Erie Bayhawks back in the G League bubble in 2021, and now he's with the Pelicans. And he was a guy he's like the Swiss Army knife, so he does everything, right? He plays defense, he rebounds well, he scores, he's a slasher, he can hit the open three. So yeah, guys like that for sure. Guys like that for sure. Also,
yeah,
but the
yeah,
thing
yeah, yeah.
about it's weird because like a lot of guys have the potential to be 3-and-D guys, but they're not really 3-and-D guys. You know what I mean? Like they have the length
Yeah,
and the
yeah.
athleticism to like be a very versatile defender, but some of them are just not. You know what I mean? It's like and that might just be they're not like smart enough or as players right now they're smart enough as players or like
Yeah.
maybe in defense is really just like an effort thing, right? So they just might not like lock in on defense maybe the way that they should. But yeah,
What? No, I was just gonna say, I think it takes a lot from a player to be realistic about his game too, especially when you get to the league, because you need to figure out as fast as you can what role can have the biggest impact.
right, right.
I think that's different because a lot of the guys have been, like I said, the main players where they were doing everything on the court, but then you come to the NBA and you got to be one or doing one thing or two things.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's why a lot of the guys in the G League who are putting up 25, 27, 30 points a night don't really end up making the NBA the way that we think that they should. You know what I mean? Because they're so
Right.
used to just having the ball in their hands all the time, taking any shot that they want, right? And that's the thing is when you're in the G League and you have the greenest light, right? You just know that this guy's not going to have that green light in the NBA. You know,
Exactly.
he's going to
Exactly.
go to the
Yeah.
NBA and they're going to have a 20-point score, right? That's the thing about the NBA is they're not looking for 20-point scores in the G League, right? Because they already have 2, 3 guys that can do the same thing. Every team has a guy off the
Exactly.
bench that can get you 15, right? So they're not necessarily always looking for just the all-around scores. Sometimes they are, sometimes they're not. An example of that is in the G League bubble, Armani Brooks, right? He led the G League in 2021 in three-pointers made. And he was a guy that was just pulling up from three, pulling up like 30 feet, 32 feet. Just didn't matter where it was, the wing, the corner, top of the key, just pulling up and was just deadly from three, right? And I always looked at Armani Brooks and I was like, man, this guy's an NBA shooter. You know what I mean? He's a guy
Right.
that
Right.
he literally takes 0 dribbles. Like, I mean, he can score off the dribble, don't get me wrong, but he's just running off of 2 screens, just catch and shoot, catch and shoot. Tyler Hall on the Texas Legends does the same exact thing, right? Where they're just catch and shoot, come off of 2 screens, shoot it. They take 1 or 2 dribbles and then the ball's out of their hands. I always think to myself, like, if I'm an NBA team, I'm looking for more probably that guy. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because that guy is not taking away from my star player. He's not taking away from my main ball handler. You know what I mean? If anything, he's just making it easier for them because this guy just can, constantly running
Catching
around
and
the
shooting.
court, and I mean, he doesn't need to take 10 dribbles to get into his shot, kind of thing. So I always think that those guys are more likely to be like the NBA guys rather than the guys that are just scoring. And a couple years ago we had Antonio Blakeney. You remember him?
Yeah, I
Yeah,
remember
yeah.
him. He's in China
He's in
now,
China now,
right?
right? The
Yeah,
thing with
yeah.
Blakeney was that, and I think with Blakeney was, there were some things about his attitude as well. But Blakeney, in terms of him on the court, his rookie season in the G League, he averaged 32 points a game, which is the highest scoring total ever
That's
in G League
tough.
history, right?
Yeah,
As a rookie, right? And I
yeah.
remember when he was doing that, all the Bulls fans, all the Antonio Blakeney LSU fans, his high school fans were like, "This guy's an NBA scorer," and he really is an NBA scorer. But when you have Zach LaVine and all these other guys on your
Got to be
team
the
that,
perfect
yeah,
team.
you're not going to get those same looks. You're not going to get those same touches, right? And so it's hard when you're like in that case, I didn't think that Blakeney's game was translatable to the NBA from the way that he was playing in the G League, even though his numbers were
I got
godly,
you. Yeah, for sure. So you can definitely say that you definitely have to adjust your game, according to what the teams are going to need.
Right.
That's for sure.
Right.
So, man, I wish you all the success going forward, man. Definitely stay in contact. Reach out to you, man. Keep following G League TV. Everybody go follow. And, yeah, man, hope you stay blessed.
Yes, sir. You too, Elijah. Thank you, bro.
All right. Thanks.